Hello, and if you're a fan of some Bollix, and if you like comics, and if you like people going on and on and on Prolix style, then this is the show for you. It's
Mm.
Prolix Comics Bollix.
Should we really start out with if you're a fan of Bollocks? Is that the place we want to begin? And
Well,
I feel
you might as well
we
be
should just
audience.
hang some down, some truck
Yeah,
nuts,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
and kind of teabag them every now and again.
Yes.
It's not a bad idea, actually.
Um,
Um,
all right.
yes. Anyway, I'm Timothy the Scalp Hunter, and he is.
Mr. Foreskin.
There we go. So as you can tell, we're a couple. If you've never seen this show before, you can tell straight out the gate we're a couple of classy dudes.
Hmm.
And so actually, I would like to start this episode with a bit of a mea culpa, actually, because
Ooh, all right.
I realized that this I kind of chose badly in a way, not the thing we're talking about, but like this category is unfit for purpose, right? So
Okay.
basically, we need to start yet another podcast,
Okay.
which is called
Oh,
like
magazines
periodical
as hell.
effect or something like that. What did you say?
Okay. Magazines as hell.
Yeah, yeah, something like this. Yeah. Um,
Periodicals as yeah. Anyway.
yeah, so this is a comics podcast. So I chose something which I thought was predominantly a comic, and this is House of Hammer.
Hmm.
Which are kind of, I suppose, relatively short-lived, although very fondly remembered 30 issues between 1976 and 1984. So obviously this thing kind of came out sporadically, right?
Well,
Over,
there was a break of a couple of years. So
yeah,
there's like from 76 to 78, it's monthly, and then there's a break of 4 years, and it comes back in 82 and
right.
goes another 2 years as a bi-monthly.
And the original run was under the legendary Des Skin,
I think
right?
maybe both one. He may not have, but I mean, I think he published them, but he wasn't the editor. He was
Yes,
the
I don't
editor
think he
for
was the
the
editor
Raw.
for the last few. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but so yeah, so so do you remember House of Hammer being about? Because you're a little bit older than me. So when this finished in 84, I would have been like 5 years old or something. So you would have been
Oh
25 or
no.
something by then.
I was, yeah, I
Yeah.
believe I was. Yes, no, I would have
So,
been nine. So no, I don't really actually remember this either. And it
but I do
predates.
remember it being like, I remember I was always aware of it. As I never saw a copy because it was ahead of my time.
Yes, I
You know
don't
what I
think I
mean?
saw any in the wild either. And if it was something that was beloved and collectible, then probably you wouldn't have seen it that much in the
Yeah,
wild.
this never turned up in a jumble sale, as
Yes, it
far as I
wasn't
remember.
like wrapped up with elastic rubber
Right.
bands. Yeah.
But I remember it, and I have a very specific. So the one thing about it as well that kind of burned onto my memory was at some point I saw a cover of, is it issue 6 or something, which is the so yeah, so House of Hammer. I mean, we'll get to details, but let's just say, just for the sake of getting this anecdote at the way that one of the
Hmm.
centerpieces of it is comics retelling of um films of Hammer Studios, right? Predominantly
Yes.
the Hammer films. And issue 6 did Moon Zero Two, right? Which was that science
Yes.
fiction
I've never seen it, so
film.
I've never seen it, but I was kind of interested in reading the. I wondered often actually when reading the comics versions of them, I was like, yeah, I think if I read this first and saw the film, I suspect I would be disappointed because
Yes,
obviously
well,
the artists
particularly
have license to do some really good design and stuff that probably
right. Well,
wouldn't have
particularly in
been
the case of
doable.
Moon Zero Two, because what I remembered from, and I think I must have seen, I must have had some other magazine of the time, and it would have had ads in it for
Hmm.
other magazines. I can't remember what that would have been, but I do remember some other old magazine I had lying around, which had a full color um, ad of House of Hammer 6 or whatever it is with Moon Zero Two, and the cover, the full color cover
Right.
of like a astronaut, I don't know, like imploding
Oh,
or
yes.
something,
Yeah. Like in
and an eyeball being, so he's still in the he's still got the helmet on, but an eyeball's being sucked out, and then his spacesuit like filling with blood. And this image, I fucking love this image. That's the one. Isn't that
yeah.
a magnificent piece
It's
of
an
art?
incredible piece of painting. And I don't know if this is, I know that John Bolton did a number of the covers, I think.
Right,
Um, and he later on uh tied up with Clive Barker actually in the 80s, the later
right.
80s, the 90s, and did a lot of yeah, like Nightbreed and Hellraiser and stuff. But yeah, anyway, that is a really
I love
really
that image, and
disconcertingly gross
yeah,
and
and there's
very
nothing like
cool.
that in the film. That's the thing.
No.
No, because I remember seeing Moon Zero Two at some point after having it built up over the years, that, and you can only imagine it disappointing. I need to rewatch it actually just to kind of
But
take
also,
it
I
at
mean,
face value.
'cause
But
I haven't actually seen it, but like there's the intimation that there's a lot of boobs in it based on this comic version. There's a lot of transparent clothes and nipples and
right,
stuff
no,
going
I
on.
don't remember that. But again, it's been a while. I'd be quite happy to watch Moon Zero Two again, just because now I've reset. I'm not expecting that, you know.
Yeah. Every other scene is like some woman stripping into her skivvies or
Right.
fully nude. Um,
Um, so yeah, so I've always kind of been quite keen to check out House of Horror, and also I thought it was just pretty much wall to wall comics, right?
right.
What I didn't realize is that it's actually um it's a yeah, much more of a overall magazine, really, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, and I mean, really, apparently, because I'm not really sure about like the chronology of things like Fangoria and stuff, but it seems like it was really maybe the first of that type
Yeah,
of
this is what surprised me. So this is my meal culpa is this is because I thought, oh, 30 issues and I expected it's all comics. I didn't allow myself enough time to
Mhm.
read and digest it properly because I didn't expect there's going to be a lot of articles and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
basically, I've kind of skimmed these magazines for the comics.
Yes,
And we'll get to this. That might not necessarily be the strong point of this magazine, but
right.
and they're up on archive.org. Someone's put them up there, and you can
Mhm.
grab. So I've actually grabbed the torrent to have them all because I actually do want to go through them all properly, like actually. But I didn't
Read all
have
their
time to do it. So that's my mea culpa is that I'm I'm reviewing the comics, but I should really be reviewing the magazine because we'll get to the comics. But what I realized reading this was not only was it at first you think, oh, okay, comic, and then they chuck in a few, you think, oh yeah, there's a few, kind of quickly thrown together articles or whatever. But no,
Mhm.
no, no, the more you start going through, you're like, hang on, these articles are like good, and they're like
Yes,
by good writers, and
yes,
um,
knowledgeable, and you realize again how many of the things that I was excited about 20 years later that these guys were right
yes,
they were right there on the money. They're into like there's an interview with Dario Argento in one of the later issues.
yes,
There's like they're actually talking to the people at
yeah.
the time making these things, right?
And there's people like John Brosnan writing for it and stuff like that. But yeah, I was surprised. And then so there's good and then there's some of them really. There's like one which is horror around the world or something. It's called, right. And you're
Mhm.
thinking, fuck, this was a British newsstand magazine from the 70s, and yeah, they're covering like things that boutique labels are still tracking down and putting out now, right? Like it's very
Yes.
wide ranging. And then
Yeah.
episode 25 turns out our old mate Ramsey Campbell has
Yes, friend of the
an
show.
article.
Um,
And it's fascinating as well because it's Video Nasty's era.
yes.
So he's railing against the censorship of the time. So
Mhm.
yeah,
And I
so
couldn't
I
think too
wish.
about, do you remember
Hmm,
the section in one of the novels we read where he kind of has a bit of a go at the fans, the
yes,
Gorzy
yes,
folks,
yes,
and then
yes.
thinking, but here he is,
In real
going about the
time.
way,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, and it was fascinating. And you got Stephen Jones, right? David Peary, Dennis Gifford. I mean, there's a lot of good writing in it,
Hmm.
and I didn't expect that. I, that's not what I signed on for. And yes, so if I knew this in advance, I would have taken my time, read them more thoroughly
Yeah.
to cover, and yes, started a new podcast, the Periodicals as Spec, because to be honest, if just from the comics point of view, that's a little bit that was the least
Yes.
interesting thing for me. Not because they're because I mean there's some great artwork, for example,
Oh, yeah. And in
really
fact,
top-notch stuff.
yes. And those the artists, it's interesting because this just about like just comes before Deathskin's Warrior, right?
Hmm.
Which in many ways kind of reinvigorates that kind of that weird place like that where I think English comics had this maybe more than American comics ever did. Like people who had one foot in the underground and one foot in the mainstream, you know? I
Yes,
don't think you had much of like, I mean, Basil Wolverton is one of the very few people I can think of that maybe was kind of able to do both. But I think, yeah, your Robert Crumb wasn't showing up also working for Marvel Comics or anything like that. That was
yeah.
just, you know,
I,
whereas,
I I get the feeling that was maybe, again, I might be wrong with it, but I get the feeling that comics were always a bit more legit in people's mind in the United States, right? Whereas I think in the UK there was just this image that, well, comics is just Beano and Dundee, right? It's for kids. And
right,
so if you took comics seriously, you were like
there's
just
something
so
wrong with it.
ghetto eyes that it
Right.
like you wrote for like fanzines or like newsstand things. It was kind of the same
Yeah.
people in a way, right? It was the same. Um, yeah, it wasn't, I think, taken as seriously, even though there were people clearly. I mean, how many? This actually quite interests me now. So obviously, um, you have people of all ages reading comics, and they always have, right?
Mhm.
But when I was a kid growing up and I was reading like, whatever, whether it be Beano Dundee 2000 AD, War, Picture Library comics and stuff like that. Like as a child, I was never aware that there was an adult readership. Obviously, adults were writing and drawing
Yeah.
them,
Hmm.
but you didn't get like. And I remember when you discovered American comics for the first time, and they had like the letters pages,
Letters pages, yeah.
and you'd be aware that, oh, some of these people sound a little bit more mature, right? They don't sound
Hmm.
like kids. It's actually grown men talking about,
Yeah.
arcs in and I remember I don't remember having that it just felt very much like everyone reading this was of the same child demographic or teenage demographic. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? It didn't
Yes.
feel like
Yeah.
there was that, but I'm sure they were. I'm sure they
think
were
with, I think
picking
with
up 2000 AD and
2000 AD, I think did have a crossover.
yeah, maybe
But I
not
don't
Beano
think it was.
Dundee so much, but
But yeah, I don't. I think there weren't even the Eagle and stuff like that. I think was probably less so. Um,
right.
but I yeah, but I think 2000 AD for whatever reason had this cachet where um like Anthrax were fans of 2000 AD, like the not the Poison, the band. And yeah, there was they had other kind of famous adult. I think like Suggs from Madness would be photographed reading 2000 AD.
Right. Um, yeah, so I think that's the thing is I would have liked to have had a bit more time
Yes, yeah.
and I'll take the time, but obviously we're not going to do this again. But
No,
but
no.
I think the thing with the comics is as well, so it's interesting. So I remember I don't think we've discussed this on here before, but we discovered that um we both had the Marvel's RoboCop
Yes,
um comicization. It's not enough,
yes.
was it?
Comic adaptation.
Yes, I guess we
Yeah.
both had that when we were kids, and I think we both had it before we saw the film, right?
Yes.
And we
Yeah.
both really liked it.
Hmm.
And I haven't gone back, but I suspect that is probably actually probably a superior comics adaptation of the film, right? It's probably
Yeah, yeah. I think it was quite good
yeah.
for
Um,
sure.
but what was interesting about that is, yeah, I remember reading that as a child before seeing the film, and then seeing the and so the thing with I think, and I understand in the 70s, um, this stuff wasn't around, like it had been and gone from the theaters. It
Yes. So it
might
wasn't.
sometimes have been turning up on television, but there was no
Yeah.
videos.
Yes.
So this was your way of enjoying those stories, right? Whereas
Yeah.
I think now reading stuff like this is awkward because it feels like, oh, I could just watch the film.
What's the utility?
Yeah,
Yeah. Although they are kind of a nice like. Now, do they call them Cliff's Notes or Cole's Notes in England?
I think it's Cliff Notes.
Cliff Notes there. Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So yeah,
Cold
there is a
Notes is
nice.
an ice cream or something, isn't it?
Okay, I think Cole's Notes first. I think was the Canadian equivalent of Cliff
Yes, I
Notes.
think so. Yeah. Yeah, no, we
But
don't
anyway,
say Cliff Notes in the UK either. That's something an American thing I picked up. I don't know what it is in the UK, actually.
okay,
Yeah.
interesting. But basically, yeah, you could get them for Shakespeare and stuff, and they would be kind of like a condensed, quick to read. So you get the narrative without doing the work, basically. And so in that way, I quite enjoyed them as stripped down. In the case of the movies I'd seen, I was like, oh yeah, it was nice to revisit Plague of the Zombies or Dracula and stuff like that in that form. And then every now and again there was ones that I hadn't seen, and I was like, oh, it piqued my curiosity potentially to see. Well,
Hmm.
the Moon Zero, whatever the hell it was, that one definitely. But that might be because it's because of that cover, which you're now telling me there's nobody's face explodes, and also probably there's not a lot of TNA in there either.
No, I think you might want to stick to the comic
Comics
version.
there, yeah.
Um, I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, it's been a while. Maybe it's bursting with tits and gore, but I doubt it somehow.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah. So it's yeah, tempting as it is because it's tempting just to talk about all the articles or the ones that I did read, but trying to stick.
Hmm.
But yeah, but I don't know. It's these kind of comics, they have a strange lack of utility or something, I suppose. Whereas once it's kind of a bit like the paperback novelization as well, right? Like
Yes.
some of those things, but yeah, I don't know those. I don't know. Yeah, it seems like a bit. On the one hand, I can't get overexcited about the comics, but on the other hand, it seems a bit churlish to criticize them as well. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Well,
So yeah, so I would like to celebrate House of Hammer as an overall magazine for sure.
yeah.
If you consider all the articles and then there was a bit of comics, that was fine. And no, it was actually I like you. I didn't quite realize. I I thought of House of Ham as like a peripheral um thing that was about in the 70s and 80s, and now it was, it was just serves as nostalgia for people who were old enough to read at the time. But
Right.
now I realize it deserves to be put in that continuum of a serious newsstand genre magazine, pre like Dark Side
Yeah.
stuff. And I
As I
think that
said,
the reason
before
is
Fangoria,
because
before any of that.
yeah, and I think the reason is just because it's framed in house, it's not called World of Horror or
No.
Horror Cinema Periodical. It's so you think, oh, it's just going to be a bunch of dodgy comics about based on Hammer films. Like it
Hmm.
seems very niche.
Yeah.
And unless you pick it up and look through it, and then you realize, oh, hang on, this is like a proper fucking, I can imagine grown up, you know, um, film fans who are into horror
Oh yeah.
would have thoroughly enjoyed House of Hammer, right? But unless you knew, if you just saw it sat there on the newsstand, you probably wouldn't have bothered picking it up, right? It probably wouldn't even have been in not that we really had in those days, an extensive like film section. it would have been with the comics, right? Like you said, it would have
Yeah.
been next to Eagle or something.
Hmm.
So it's an interesting one. I suspect we're not the only ones to have had the wrong idea about what this was. Right.
Right. And I also think that so in the initial run, in those years, that's kind of the death gasp of Hammer as well, right?
Oh
That kind of
yeah. Oh yeah. It's
76 to
gone. It's gone.
78.
Right. 76. It's to the devil a daughter, and it's gone. Right. So it's very much
Yeah.
a kind of um yeah. It seems a sort of posthumous kind of wound licking kind of.
Yes.
But the thing is, it's not
Celebration,
really.
yeah.
I mean, it's not. I mean, yes, it is. There are articles about Hammer in it, and obviously all the
Yeah.
comics are Hammer, and that's the thing there. But it's not.
Brand.
Yeah,
But
it's
no,
slightly.
but it's much more than that, as you
Yeah,
said.
it's slightly disingenuous, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's interesting. I wonder, in the long run, did it do it favors on? Like, I understand you put that on there, so you automatically have a fan base. But I'm
Yeah.
also wondering if it also might
Exclude.
have
Yeah.
prevented it from getting a more serious readership who,
Hmm.
because yeah, it can't just be us who hadn't figured out what this was, right?
No. I think for me, the other thing that really surprised me was like when this comes out, again, like especially the first run, right? The 76 to 78 is right around the same time as 2000 AD is
Hmm.
kind of is starting up, right? And I wasn't expecting, for example, in issue one, like so, you've got whatever, I think Dracula maybe, or one of the is the adaptation in the main, but then they also have these short stories, right? That come at the
Yes.
back of the magazine. Later on, there are Van Helsing's tales, and some of those are actually very good. I thought I
Yeah.
in ways enjoyed them more than the film adaptations because they were
Yes.
more EC comics, like get in,
Yeah.
get out, tell you a nice 3 page,
Well,
guy
they're
gets
they're, they're
stuck from
sad suture shocks, basically, right?
Basically, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But then they're also drawn by the people who would have been drawing them. So like weirdly in the first few issues, it's a recurring the further adventures of Captain Kronos, right?
Right. Right.
Um, but it's drawn by Ian Gibson of like Robo Hunter and a shit ton of other 2000 AD stories, and his style to me is immediately recognizable. I was like, oh my God,
Right.
that's Ian Gibson, weird. And then as I went on, Brian Boland, the best known for Judge Dredd, and then later on for The Killing Joke, right, with Alan Moore.
Hmm.
He does two. He does one. He did Plague of the Zombies with another that he inked Plague of the Zombies, which if you didn't look at, that's actually quite a nice. That's one of the later ones. It's from issue 14. It's a decent or 13 decent adaptation. And then he did Vampire Circus as well.
Right. Right.
And then David Lloyd shows up, who did V for Vendetta, right?
Yeah.
And he's got a very nice kind of style that suits this stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of really interesting, solid art.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. I think the thing with a bit of a missed opportunity as well, I think. So, for instance, they do. I appreciated that they go back as well and they incorporate like Quatermass and stuff like that as well. But
Yes.
what I mean
Yep.
is, I think they missed a trick maybe in. I don't know if this was the idea, maybe over a longer run of time, but rather than do these kind of digest, reenact comic
Hmm.
Saigen versions of films, I
Hmm.
would have preferred, yeah, like that Captain Kronos strip alluded to in a way, was to take the
Right.
baton and run with it. So can you imagine like Quatermass comics that was just
Yes.
Professor
New
Quatermass doing
adventures. Yeah.
yeah, that would have been
Yeah.
something. That
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I think that's was a bit of a missed opportunity that they didn't just take it and just run, right, and really
Hmm.
that would have been. I mean, bring back House of Hammer.
Yes.
If you're watching Des Skin, I think a new generation is ready for, like, yeah, do that. Just
Hmm.
I don't know. You might have more problems with the licensing now because that's the other thing. I think obviously this is a good example of someone really seizing on an opportunity. And obviously, at some point, they managed to bag like you said, maybe
The
because they
license.
were done and dusted and out the door by 76, and people
Hmm.
they weren't clamoring for it. But obviously, it was a bit of a coup to, yes, we can do all the
Hmm.
Hammer stuff, right? But they didn't quite fully take advantage of doing everything you could do with those characters.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think you're very much
But
right.
still, a valiant attempt, comic wise and horror, you know, horror film magazine wise. I mean, yeah, bit of a revelation.
I
Uh,
also I was surprised too and impressed because again, this has been published at magazine format, which I don't know how it worked we've talked about this before, but in the States, right, you could get away with things if you published at a magazine size and in black and white
yes,
that you couldn't get away with if you published in the smaller,
yes.
standard North American comic size. And
I
here
think it might also be something to do with like it might be a slightly different tax bracket or something like that.
yeah, but certainly subject matter wise, there was an understanding that oh no, these are comics meant for older readers, for older teenagers, for adults, so therefore we can push the envelope a bit more. And that's what surprised me with the adaptations of some of the movies. I was like, wow, they've really not shied away from the gore side of things or from the sex side of things. And that's what, and even some of the little short stories are quite grim. Like
Hmm.
they're enjoyably kind of harsh and yeah, anyway, so that was I wasn't expecting it because I had this image in my mind of okay, it's British and of a certain vintage. They're not going to up the stakes of a Hammer. They're going, if anything, they'll tamp it down a bit and make it more palatable for a younger audience, but that's not the case. Although Brian Boland complained actually with his Vampire Circus that when he saw the art printed, that they had gone back in and whited out a certain amount of brain and blood and stuff that he had drawn in. Um,
There is also a very I didn't have time to look it up, but look, I'm sure you can search for Des Skin career interviews. Someone put out with it in the last few years, put up online. Might have been Down the Tubes or someone like that. There's a very long career interview with Des Skin.
okay.
A lot of stuff about House of Hammer in there, which is really fascinating because yeah, if you want to know about British comics, I mean, Des Skin, it's a
Yeah.
wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information, right?
Mhm.
Um, yes, and maybe one day I will have a framed Moon Zero 2 artwork on
Yes.
my wall because that really is, I don't know, it's something for me. Just
Yeah.
seeing that at the right age, that just caused
Fired your
to,
imagination.
to dream. That was just
Yes.
so. There we go. Kind of a bit of a somewhat compromised episode, but I think we did get across just how
Oh yeah.
overall really quite impressed and surprised we are. And now it makes sense why people collect,
Remembered it fondly. Yeah.
yeah, and collect the back issues and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, yes. So yeah,
Yeah, I'd imagine, as you pointed out too, at the time, where else are you going to get information about Japanese and,
yeah,
you know, yeah, again, I was really surprised by the breadth of what they were
yeah.
and the
Even just
expertise of the people writing about it.
like I said, I didn't have unfortunately, I didn't give myself the time to even read it properly, but just flicking, I saw some, what the hell is that? Like a really obscure kind of, it doesn't mean it's good, but like
Mhm.
some Taiwanese ghost film from the 70s I'd never heard of, and I
Yeah.
went and looked that up. I'd never heard of it. So yeah, no, it's no, very, very, very interesting
Mm.
stuff indeed. Yeah, didn't expect that. A bit blindsided by quite how
Mhm.
relevant this was back in the day.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
there'll be some more teabagging next time.
Mhm. Yes, indeed.
Until then.